Hey guys, JR here with COP Audio, your grumpy sound guy. As promised last week, we are going to take a look at Wi-Fi mixing. I'm going to go through my setup, why I went with this setup, how it all is configured and worked. We're going to go through the app. We are in the shop. It's probably about, I don't know, it's got to be 98 or 100 degrees today. So, we got the fans on here and got some air moving around the shop. But I wanted to kind of do an in-depth YouTube video of this so you can see exactly how all this stuff works, how I do business, and how my system is set up. To preempt the conversation, I was originally running around with an X32 and an S32 stage box. I always seemed like I was just shoving that thing in the corner somewhere and Wi-Fi mixing anyway. So I just got to a point where I was like, why am I hauling this thing around? It just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Now, there's guys that will argue that they feel better having physical knobs and faders in front of them. And my counter argument is always, you're still controlling, software with those physical faders. If the thing is going to crash and take a poop on you, it's probably going to be, either a power supply issue or just a catastrophic software firmware issue. So it really doesn't matter if you have knobs and faders in place or not. Your chances of those kind of things happening are the same, whether you're using, a Wi-Fi only, no control surface kind of, setup like we're going to go through here today, or whether you're using an X or an M32 or whatever your choice of digital mixer is, with physical knobs and faders. A lot of guys, I think, and man, I'm just going to keep it real, and this is probably going to ruffle some feathers, but I think a lot of guys just got ego about it, like they feel like that they look like a guy who really has it together when they're standing behind, a big 32 channel console out front, and they jump through all the hoops to do that, to set that up and to have that persona. And there is some validity to that, to the people who don't know any better. The average, person is going to be like, wow, look at that console and all that kind of stuff. I got a buddy of mine, one of my competitors who's a good friend of mine, just bought a big, gigantic, dear Lord, the thing must be, 6 feet long, digital console for some of his bigger shows. And, he has shows that justify that sort of thing, but he takes them on shows where it's like, dude, you really don't need that. But hey, it looks impressive, and you got people over there taking selfies with it and stuff like that and everything. I really don't have that kind of ego. I've been in the business so long, I just don't care, I'm trying to do things that make my life easy and get the results my clients are used to getting from me. And the system we're going to go through here is just how that works. So I got rid of the X in the S32 setup, and I bought an M32C, which stands for core, which is basically the brains of an M32. It's a one rack space, kind of setup. I'm going to show that to you here in just a second. And then the Midas D32 stage box, which has the upgraded preamps in it from the S32. And then I come out of the M32C into a router, and then out of that router into a point of access, which gives me extended 5G coverage all around the venue. And I'm going to show you all that stuff, as well. So let's break the video so I can turn the camera around, and we're going to kind of just walk you through what my control rack looks like, and then we'll have some further conversation about all that. Okay, hang tight. Okay, so here is the control rack. What you see at the top here is just 4 channels of wireless mics. I always carry 4 handhelds everywhere I go because it saves me a whole boatload of running cables to the downstage, front line of vocals. I just set up those 3 or 4 vocal mics and bam, we're good to go. Underneath this right here is just the iPad running mixing station. We're going to dive into that in depth here in just a few minutes. Underneath here we just got a power strip, That's the M32, the Midas M32C, and then the Midas M32 stage box. And then if we back up here and you look at this thing up here, I know the light is kind of jacking us up here a little bit. Let me put the antennas down so you can kind of see what we got. That is the TP-Link digital, point of access that comes out of the back of my rack. Let's go around here. So we have a power strip up top. There's the wirelesses. I have them coiled up down underneath here so I can pull them through the front of the rack and plug them right into the front of the rack. This right here is a long-range Bluetooth receiver. So I always have on top of this rack, I always have my iPad I'm running Mixing Station on, and then I have an iPad mini that I always have music playback going on, and I have configured a whole bunch of different playback genre lists, for different events and stuff like that. And I just Bluetooth it right into this unit, which comes into the DL32 in the front, and then I leave it run all night long. So all I have to do is just turn the faders up and down on that, and I got music playback, at the drop of a dime. And it makes the show just seem really flawless and very smooth running. So down here, the M32 core, behind this router is the back of the DL32. They just kind of Cat 5. I'm using Cat 6 cable. I would suggest Cat 5e or Cat 6 into the stage box. So that's how we get connectivity there. Out of the M32C into the router. Out of the router into this, which I'm pretty sure is just a power source for the point of access that goes up. This is just a charger for the iPad mini. And I get to roll into a venue with this thing and an amp rack, and bam, I'm good. Okay, now Mixing Station. Let me turn my camera this way. I know there's a little bit of glare on the iPad, just kind of bear with it there. But the beautiful thing about Mixing Station is you can configure this whole section over here any way you want. Like this line of inputs kind of comes stock, but all this purple and gray stuff in the center, all these mutes that I have set up and mute groups and stuff, that's a short delay, that's a long delay taps. I have a long delay edit, so I can just pull up the long delay effects rack and make adjustments on the fly. This is a sends on fader for the long delay. So if I go to, I think this is a Shake the Room scene that we're looking at, because I have them this weekend. So there's my sends on fader for the long delay, and it's just the center vocal that I'm sending to that. It's nice to have that stuff right on the top of your workflow. That's the thing that is so cool about Mixing Station, is that you can just create your own workflow. So if I'm running wedge monitors, so this is sends on fader. Let's go to a channel thing here. These guys are all ears, so I don't have anything set up in their thing. Let's find a scene where we do have some monitors, and bear with me here. Most of my bands are ears these days, so I don't have a whole lot of I think Burp the Cat is monitors. So yep, there we go. So as you can see, as we go through the different sends on fader for each monitor mix, this is just a layer that I have designed for 4 monitor mixes. So you can create this. This is something that you put together on your own, so it makes your workflow so much quicker. And then I have 3rd octave EQs on each mix, and go back. So that was the 3rd octave on mix 1. Mix 2, there's the 3rd octave on that. Bunch of stuff carved out to keep feedback out of the way, and so on and so forth. The front of house EQ, I believe the last time I had these guys out, we were in a very small room, and they're a loud band, so there's usually my house EQ is not that, not configured like that. I usually find 99% of my room issues at the channels and make it happen there, but like I said, I'm pretty sure we were in a pretty small room and high volume, and we were just trying to keep feedback out of the way. Mute enable just gives me the ability to mute or unmute a channel if I want to. So when it's turned off, you can't. When it's turned on, you can unmute the channel. Mute all this is a really cool feature in Mixing Station. You got to hold and it mutes or unmutes. See, if I tap it, it doesn't do anything. But if I hold, it mutes and unmutes. And I have that mute all set up to mute everything except for a talkback mic and playback, which is coming from that Bluetooth receiver we had in the back of the rack there a little while ago. I also have effects mutes set up. So it mutes all the vocal effects, leaves the drum plate open. So I can do that on the fly. That's all stuff that I created in the app. And then the super cool thing is okay, this is set up for 4 monitors, but let's say we need to do 6 monitors. I just created another layer, and now I have 6 monitors. See how quick and easy that was? Now I have the same send zone fader, for all 6 monitor sends, and the 3rd octave EQs, on the 31 bands on each, monitor mix that way. Sometimes we have this 6 wedge mixes for festival stuff. Most of the time in a club scene, it's 4 wedge mixes and 2 ear mixes, like drums and lead vocal might be ears. So it gives me the ability to do that. It's just flexible, All my other stuff is still there. It's just kind of moved around a little bit to make room for everything. But yeah, you can go back to where this is kind of what happens. Let me shut the app down and show you how we start all this. Yeah, let's just start as if we are opening up the app for the first time. So you just plugged in the control rack. You've given it some time for everything to boot up, for the router to boot up, the console, the mixer, the point of access, all that stuff. Now you're just firing up the iPad. The first thing I do is go to settings and make sure I'm connected to my access point. CLP Audio Access 5G. So once I've done that, and don't worry about the no internet connection because you don't need internet. That's not what you're using it for. Then I open Mixing Station, and this screen comes up. This screen shows you all the different consoles that Mixing Station will work with. Never mind my little fly buddy there. It's summertime, bear with it. But yeah, so Mixing Station works with the Mackie DL, the Soundcraft SI-VI, which is really handy because the stock Soundcraft SI app is not that great. And then the Allen and Heath SQ, GLD, and QU. And then Music Tribe is the X and M line, so it will work with X and M32, X Air, and the Wing, which is super cool. In our application, we're using the M. Brings you to this screen. Try and get it to focus. I think the reflection is jacking with it. In this box right here, it is basically just showing you, that's where you put in your console IP address. Once you've done that, you just go over here and you hit connect, and it is connecting. Boom. Now we're back to wherever we left off. That is a beautiful thing about the M32. If you lose power or something like that, or some 5-year-old gets close to your rack and turns the power strip off or something, or trips over a cable and unplugs you from the wall, it's always going to bring you back, at least it's supposed to. It's always going to bring you back to where you were when the console was shut down. In the olden days, PreSonus was horrible for this. It would bring you back to whatever scene was recalled, whatever scene you were on. So that may sound cool, but think of it in these terms. You called up a scene, you did sound check, but you haven't saved it yet to that scene. So that means when that console comes back on, you're not going to get all the adjustments you made because you didn't save it. With this scenario, you are good to go. Now, I am of the habit of saving. I always save after sound check. I save after the first set, and I save after the third set at the end of the night. That way I know I have the most recent adjustments in that scene, and then just recall it, and that's my starting point with that band at that venue the next time I come around. So yeah, so that's kind of how, you know, the whole Wi-Fi thing works. You know, that's how mixing station works. Now you can configure this to do, I have it set up, I have big fingers, as you can see, and I wear readers because I'm getting old and blind. But, you know, so I have mine set up for 8 channels. You can set this up for 16 channels. You can remove the meter bridge up top. You can configure what you want to see on the channels. Like this one is set up to where I can see phantom power, gain, EQ, and I think channel delay on each channel. Let's open a channel so you can kind of see what's going on there. So there is a kick channel on my rig. I am aux fed, so this is your gate. Let's go back here. This is your EQ. As you can see, I was really pushing the attack. And you can scroll through these from the top too. Yeah, gate, EQ. There's a compression on the kick. You know where I am with that. This tells me all my sends for that channel. And then finally, because I'm aux fed, the beautiful thing about the X and M32 is they come right out of the gate with the mono out being your sub. You know, so if you want it that way, you know, that's what this mono says right there. And this controls how much sub I am sending from the kick to the sub. So the cool thing is with this kind of, with the aux fed setup, is, you know, I can pull this down and then just hear the attack from left, right over here. You know, I can pull the sub clean out. And then once I get the attack where I want it, I can pull the sub up, and then I can go over here to the final outs. This is left, right, that's the tops, and then this is my sub. I can do just the opposite. I can pull the tops down and listen to just the sub and see what, you know, the amount of thump and stuff that I'm getting from the sub, you know, as well off the kick. And, you know, just makes things, you know, super groovy. You know, aux fed sub gives you a lot of flexibility, you know, and getting the absolute most out of your system. Here's the overview. That's gain, polarity. You got to hold down the 48 volt to turn that on and off. Link channel will link 2 channels together for a stereo thing. This is a quick view of the sends for this channel. In this scenario, I'm only sending the kick to the plate verb. You can arrow back and forth between the channels. So let's just go back out. Let's look at the lead vocal channel. Yeah, see now how that changed? Those are all the first 4 are the wedge mix inputs. There's a vocal group. I took this is what I like to do. I turned 2 of the buses into subgroups so I can do some compression. And what I do is I send all my vocals, I compress at the channel at 7:1, I compress here 4:1, and then the left, right, out, I compress 2.5:1. So as you're getting closer to final output, your compression is releasing a bit, and you're not robbing your mix of dynamics, you know. Having the subgroup, you know, compression, especially when you have a vocal group where there's 3 or 4 singers, this gives you the ability to kind of tie all those backing vocals together real tight, you know, and still be, dynamic and musical, you know, to where you're not over compressing. I compress hardest at the channels. So let's see where we are with this. So yeah, that's squished pretty good, 7:1. I always output about 4 dB. I want to be compressing at least 4 dB. My attack's at 30 milliseconds, holds at 10, and releases it at 151. You can kind of zoom in on that stuff if you wanted to and kind of see what's up with all that. That's kind of my go-to compression settings for my vocals and stuff. So yeah. Mixing station also is very stable. I had problems with the OEM app, the M32 X32 app crashing every now and then. And with Mixing Station, I don't think I've ever had it crash. The only time it's ever given me any problems is if I put it to sleep. Like if I lock the iPad, I'm going to walk away and go to the bathroom or something. And then, I come back. Let's see, let's get it to wake up here. If I come back and unlock it and see how it's reconnecting. If you do that multiple times throughout the night, what I have found is it will sometimes not reconnect. And then in that case, all you got to do is you double click, close the app, and just reopen the app. Give it like 5 seconds and then reopen the app, go back through our thing, and boom, it puts us right back in. That's the only time I've ever seen this app crash. And I probably have, I don't know, I'm going to say I probably have 12 or 1,500 shows on Mixing Station, maybe 2,000 shows. I've been using it for several years. A buddy of mine turned me on to it when it first came out, and I've been a big fan, so I really like it. I highly recommend it. And I think it works, and it's cheap. I think when I bought it, it was, I bought it when it first came out, so I may be getting some grandfather discounts or something with the updates and stuff, because I haven't had to pay anything but the initial cost. The initial cost was like, I don't know, $15 or $20. Now I think it depending on what level of, I think it has broken down the mixer in different levels of access to features, and there's different price points. I really don't know what it costs now. The full-blown version might cost you $30 or $40 now in the App Store. It's well worth that. I mean, there's nothing better than having something that you can really depend on. So that's Mixing Station. Now back to my big ugly mug. So mistakes that I see guys make regularly when they're Wi-Fi mixing. Number one, they'll use some $35 router that they bought at Walmart that doesn't have much range. They'll mix on 2.4 gigahertz instead of 5G. The reason we do 5G is because all those Line 6 guitar wirelesses and bass guitar wirelesses you see guys using on stage, they're all using 2.4 gigahertz. 2.4 gigahertz it works well, it has great range and works well through walls and stuff like that. 5G does not. 5G does not work through walls that well. That's why I use the point of access, and I always try to stay within line of sight of the point of access, and I've never ever had a problem with it. I've been every bit of 100, 150 feet away from it and mixed all night with no issues. But if you're using some cheap wireless or cheap router that really isn't giving you much range, then it's going to be connecting and disconnecting the whole time you're trying to mix, or you'll have to just be standing on top of it, especially if you're using 2.4, because you just got it sitting on top of the rack and there's 500 people between you and the rack, and the band and all their wirelesses. Plus 99.9% of house wireless stuff operates over 2.4. Now, I know that there's 30-some channels of 2.4 to choose from, and if you want to go in there and do a search and find a clean 2.4 channel at every gig you go to, by all means, rock it out, man. I'm not mad at you. You do business the way you want to do business and figure it out however you want to figure it out. But for me, that's not how I do business. I use the point of access. I'm usually up and going in 5-10 minutes. I'm really just waiting for everything to boot up, and then once I get connected to the access point and get into the mixer, I'm usually golden the rest of the night, and some guys are afraid of the point of access technology because they're afraid they're not going to be able to figure it out. Look, man, I'm no IT guy, and if I can figure it out, you can figure it out. I do have some experience with computers and stuff like that, but I'm not an IT guy. I've just been, knee deep in computers since, the whole .com craze of the 90s. I was a tech director at a big church during those years, and all my volunteer staff underneath me were IT guys. and they all kind of just showed me and taught me the ropes and that sort of thing. So I know basic, networking, and that's really all the knowledge you need to do this with. You don't need to be a network specialist or anything like that. But if you don't have a stable app like Mixing Station to work with, or if you don't have your networking correct, it's gonna fight you all night long. I was just at a gig a couple weeks ago with a highly respected sound guy, buddy of mine, who is, I would probably venture to say he's probably one of the best sound guys in the Mid-Atlantic. In terms of middle market guys, he's better than me. He knows more stuff than I do about stuff because he's older than me and been doing it longer. But I have huge amounts of respect for him. But we were at a show. He was Wi-Fi mixing, and he was having that network problem. The whole time we were there. He had to get up and stand close to the stage to continue to have connectivity to his console. That kind of sucks. That kind of just knocks the wind out of my sails at a gig. I don't want to be that guy. I don't want to be dealing with that stuff. The point of access, and that point of access was like $80. I think I paid another 80 or 100 for the router, and a lot of guys are using Nighthawks. They're good routers to use. They got pretty good range, that sort of thing. Usually if you get a gaming router, even if you got to pay $150 for it or whatever, I keep a Nighthawk under the seat of my truck all the time when I'm out doing walk-ins and stuff, in case we have a router crash or I need to have independent access to their console. Maybe their router blows dog and I don't want to use it, so I'll use my router, and I just try to be prepared that way. But my buddy was kind of fighting it all night, and I was like, dude, buy a point of access, man. It makes all the difference in the world in staying connected to your mixer, especially when you're trying to do when you're trying to fly in long delay, between phrasing and stuff like that. You really need a low lag time, to really mix like you would on a control surface. Man, that's going to be all in the type of router that you use. That's why the gaming routers are so good. They're fast. They're like super fast, and my point of access is the same way. This point of access is the same thing that they use in like campgrounds to provide, Wi-Fi for, 150 campers every weekend, So I think it has, 1,000-yard range or something like that. Something crazy, ridiculous that I'll never need to be that far away. But, if I can get 100 or 150 feet, I'm happy. I'm never going to be further than that away from the stage. So I can't express and stress enough the importance of having a good router that's fast, using a solid app. Some of the other OEM apps, when I say OEM, that means the stock app that the brand of mixer you're using created, like the M32 app or the X32 app or the SI app, Soundcraft. I've never had an SI app freeze up on me or crash. It's not my favorite app because it doesn't give you control over the long delay. I think that's kind of cheesy. They definitely missed it on that. The rest of the features work really well, and it's a solid app that does not tend to crash as long as your networking is correct. As long as you got a good router and a point of access up, you're going to be okay that way. The Mackie DL app is like that too. I've never had it freeze up on me or anything. I don't have as much time with that. I install a lot of those in churches, but I don't hear any feedback from guys telling me that they're having problems, with the app crashing or anything like that. But all that stuff is part of it. And that's where a lot of guys get, frustrated, is they get frustrated because their networking isn't correct, or they're using, an X or M32 stock app that has its own little bugs and issues. Spend the extra money and just buy the Mixing Station. It's not a lot of extra money. Spend the extra money and put up a point of access. It's not a lot of extra money, and it gives you that peace of mind you're used to getting out of a control surface with your iPad. The other thing too is I always carry a spare iPad The nice thing about Mixing Station is you have access to all the features of Mixing Station, even on your cell phone. It doesn't limit features like a lot of the OEM apps do. You know, a lot of the OEM apps will limit features on your phone. I guess because they're kind of thinking that people are using this on their phone just to run their own monitor mixes, so a lot of times they're set up that way. Mixing Station is not. You can do everything on your iPhone on Mixing Station that you can do on an iPad, you know, and it's Android friendly. You know, the guy that turned me on to it's an Android guy. He uses it on Android tablets and Samsung phones and stuff like that, so there's never any issues that way. It's very compatible with both formats. I just am an Apple guy because it's super stable, and there's a whole ton of other audio, pro audio apps that were designed for Apple. 99% of the apps that we see today were designed for Apple because it's the most stable format. Mac has always just had that going on. So I carry a second iPad, an iPad mini that I use my music playback for. And if I get in a situation where my iPad may overheat or something like that, so I mean, I guess we should probably have that conversation. I always have the mini as a backup, and the mini works fine. You know, it's an older, like 4th gen, I think, mini. The battery doesn't last that long. I bought an Anker external battery source that I can just throw in my pocket with a 6-foot cord and plug it into the iPad if I'm losing, battery life while I'm mixing. That's another little trick that can help you get through the gig and help make your Wi-Fi mixing life a lot easier. But let's talk about what we do if the iPad overheats. So if your iPad overheats, and if you're out mixing in these 100-degree days in the summertime, it's only a matter of time, I had a gig a couple weeks ago where I had that problem, and I had to go up and get the mini and use the mini to mix while I put my full-size iPad in front of the fan. I run a fan on the front of my control rack and on the front of my my amp rack to keep air flowing on both of those. And if you didn't notice when we were looking at the rack, I always keep the top space of all my racks open because heat rises. And if you have that space taken up with a power strip or something like that, a rack mount power conditioner, then you're trapping that heat in the rack. So that's a road trick that I learned years and years ago. Always keep the top space of your rack open so hot air, when it rises, can escape from the rack easier. But I run fans and all that, so I had to put the iPad in front of one of the fans and use the full-size iPad and use the mini to mix for a while. A lot of guys will throw them in their cooler. Like I keep a cooler on all these summer gigs. I take a small lunchbox size cooler with about 6 or 8 bottles of water and ice because I sweat like crazy in these summers. They just melted off of us, man. I mean, let's just be honest. And I always try to keep water handy for my staff and I. So if I know that heat's going to be an issue, I will throw that iPad. All my iPads are in OtterBox cases. I highly recommend that because you are going to drop it. Accidents happen, man. It just is what it is. So I will throw it in that cooler while I'm setting up and let it really get cooled down and that sort of thing. And then I typically don't have a problem. Or if it starts getting hot, if I feel it on the back, the OtterBoxes that I use, if you look here, see how you can see the Apple logo? I can put my fingers over that Apple logo and actually feel the iPad itself, feel how warm it is. And if it feels like it's really getting hot, like during a break or something, I will throw it in the cooler, and let it do its thing. The other thing is being able to see your screen on the iPad on sunny days. That really comes with having the newer the iPad you get, the better the screen is, the brighter it is and that sort of thing. I have the newest, just regular full-size iPad, and it has a Retina screen, and it's pretty bright. Even on a sunny day, if I turn my body and get in the shade in front of me to where the iPad's in the shade, I can still see the thing, just fine to work through sound check or something. I usually put a pop-up up out front somewhere with a couple lawn chairs so that I can be in the shade. a word of advice about summertime gigs and trying to do this stuff is none of this digital stuff likes direct sunlight. None of it. I mean, none of it. So I always try to keep my mixers, my my control rack, which my mixer's in, and my amp rack, my iPads, all that stuff. I really try to keep in the shade all the time. And I mean, even, guitar players, you know exactly what I'm talking about, because a lot of times your Helix or your, if you have a digital, processor on your guitar rig, if they're in direct sunlight, sometimes they start throwing temper tantrums and don't want to work. Keyboard players, you know what I'm saying too. Keyboards don't like direct sunlight either, so they will pitch a little fit and, shut down and do all kinds of goofy stuff. So that's why I try to keep air moving across both my racks all the time. I try to keep the iPad in the shade, keep everything in the shade, throw the iPad in the cooler during the set breaks and stuff like that to keep it cool. And I typically don't have problems. I can count on one hand, in the, 5 years maybe I've been Wi-Fi mixing, that I've had my iPad overheat and shut down. And it's always been on like crazy 100-degree days and stuff like that. Some guys will take the iPad out of the OtterBox case and let it cool off. 3 weeks ago when I had my iPad overheat that way, I made a mistake by leaving. I had it plugged in charging at the house before I left for the gig. And instead of turning the iPad off before I put it in my front of house bag, I left it on in the truck while we were going down the road. And I think it kind of got a little warm in the bag, my front of house bag, before we even got to the gig. And then when we got to the gig, it was crazy screaming hot. So I did have to pull it out of the OtterBox case that day and put it in front of a fan. And it only took about 10 minutes and the thing was back on and we were good to go. I did a reboot and everything was fine. But I always have a second iPad. If it's big festival gigs, I'll even I have an iPad Air, a brand new iPad Air. I will even bring that out just as another redundancy in, having another tablet. If you're someone who is into the Android stuff, those Android tablets are super economical. You don't have to spend a bunch of money or break the bank to have a couple Android tablets on hand, already loaded up with your mixing station app and all that kind of stuff, and got your Wi-Fi stuff already in it. You do all that stuff during the week at the shop. That's what I'm doing today. Like today was about, I had some stuff going on with my subs that I think ended up being in my sub amp. But I pulled 2 of my 4 subs out of the trailer, pulled the drivers out of them, you put a multimeter on them, checked them, make sure I didn't have a blown driver. Thank God I didn't, because those things are about $400 a piece. The drivers are. And then I had to make some adjustments on the input sensitivity on my sub amps. I recently, this season, changed subs, and the new subs that I have on my club rig is much more efficient than the subs I had on last year. Last year I was using JBL SRX 728s, which has Neo magnet drivers in them. They're super good subs, very economical. I highly recommend them. 3-inch dual voice coil on those things, but the thing about the Neo stuff is they love power, so you got to really throw. I think I was throwing 4,400 watts a box into them, and they were just eating it for lunch, man. They were just loving it. The subs I have now have ferrite magnet drivers in them with 4-inch dual voice coil drivers. They're a little more modern. They're the JBL STX 828 passive subs. I can do a video on subs and stuff like that, in the coming weeks, and we can have that whole discussion. But the ferrite magnet subs don't require as much power, and I think I was just overdriving the subs a little too hard, and because I was getting a little fart every now and then, a little sub fart, and that's not cool. I don't like that. So if anything like that happens in my rig, it comes out of the trailer that week and we start tearing stuff apart. I took this opportunity to blow the dust out of all my power amps and out of the control rack, and just did some maintenance. That's what we do during the week. We get gear ready, and we do the things that we need to do to keep our systems running to peak performance. So that's kind of the deal. I know this was crazy long, but it's a lot to talk about, and I'm trying to be thorough and talking about all the different things. I'm trying to think if I missed anything about Wi-Fi mixing. I guess really the big thing I get from older guys is I think they're a little intimidated by the technology, and they just really struggle with letting go of not having physical faders and knobs, in front of them. And if that's how you roll, man, that's cool. I got, you're the one lugging that thing in and out of a club, not me, I like having the mobility of just me and a tablet out front. I can walk around the room, or I can plant down at a table or a bar stool somewhere, or do whatever I want to do. I can move around the room easily with the iPad in my hand. I use this system on my festival rig for monitors, and I have an M32 Live physical console control surface that I put out front for band engineers to use. And then I Wi-Fi mix monitors, and it's nice to be able to stand next to the artist when you're dialing in his wedge mix with the iPad in your hand, listening to the mix along with the artist. That you get some really, really good monitor mixes that way, because you're hearing exactly what the artist is hearing. It's hard to do that when you're in monitor world, or you're running monitors from front of house and you can't hear what's going on stage. Now, any good sound engineer knows his gear, and he knows how his wedges respond and what EQ settings work for his wedges. So, I mean, that's a whole nother conversation, but I still like to be on stage, standing next to the artist whenever possible, and listening to that mix as we're making their adjustments, and really making sure that I'm giving them the absolute best monitor mix that I can give them. And, being Wi-Fi gives you that ability. It just does, So with the older guys, I think it's a little fear and insecurity of the technology. With the younger guys, it's mistakes with, networking. They got cheap routers, or they're surfing on 2.4 instead of 5G. They're not using a point of access. They got their router buried in the back of their control rack or something, so there's no line of sight. That's kind of how it goes with me. That's the stuff that I see most. I don't really have any of those issues. Moving over to Wi-Fi mixing was definitely uncomfortable at first, because I came from analog. I was one of those old school guys. You just got to learn to get comfortable with it. You got to learn your way around the app the same way you learn your way around a new mixer. You're going to learn the technology one way or the other. I know some guys that have been Wi-Fi mixing so long, they really struggle when they get on a control surface, because they spent their whole life just Wi-Fi mixing that setup. And they're comfortable in their, mixing station app. But then when you get them on a controlled surface, they don't know how to navigate their way through the menus, and, how to find things through the layers and stuff like that. So it's best to know both those things if you're going to be a versatile sound engineer. You really need to be efficient both ways. I really strive to do that to the best of my ability, but I'm kind of spoiled in CLP land, where I just kind of do what I want to do. I take gigs I want to take. I don't take gigs I don't want to take, and I try to keep things simple. I build a lot of redundancy into my systems, so that if something fails, there's always something backup plan there, So yeah. So I don't really get the opportunity to mix on as many different consoles as I would like to, but my business doesn't really require that. I really don't need to be super efficient on 20 different consoles. I need to be really efficient on the 3 or 4 that I run into the most in the middle market, because that's typically where I'm at. So I hope all this helped you guys. Please like and subscribe to this channel. Hit that bell notification thing so that you're getting alerted every time that I post a new video. The TikTok channel is blowing up. It's absolutely nuts. And I'm just ranting my brains out over there about different things in the business. So go over there and like the Grumpy Sound Guy TikTok channel. I think we're pushing about 700 followers now, and man, I don't even know. I think my videos got around 15,000 views or something right now. So we're slowly growing there, as is the YouTube channel. The YouTube channel, I'm trying to be more informative and more educational, and answer questions. If you have any questions, leave me a comment, man. Show me pictures of your Wi-Fi setup. Let's have a conversation about what works for you. I am always teachable. And you may be doing something that I like and may adapt that into my system. And vice versa. We're all a community. We're all on the same team here, and we're all trying to help each other to be really good at what we do. Check out copaudio.com, COP Audio on Facebook. And if you want Grumpy Sound Guy merch, because everybody's been begging for merch, there's now a online Grumpy Sound Guy merch store, and that address is clpswagstore.com, clpswagstore.com, and you can get COP Audio merch, you can get Grumpy Sound Guy merch. There's a bunch. I think this week's featured merch t-shirt is, I think it says real drums don't have volume knobs. So that's kind of a pot shot at all the guys playing electronic drums, but the drummers will get that. I think last week was bass players. I think it said friends in low places, and it had a bass clef. That was a Grumpy Sound Guy merch. And then the one before that was Don't Suck. The whole Don't Suck thing has been super huge, and that stuff has been selling like crazy. And there's t-shirts and hats and sweatshirts and just muscle shirts and all that crazy stuff over there. So clpswagstore.com. Go over there, check it out. There's some creative stuff I think you'll enjoy. And thanks for tuning in. And shoot me a message on Facebook or something, or here in the comments section, and let me know what you would like me to talk about next. We can talk about I think my next one may be about passive versus active speakers, in the middle market kind of stuff. And we're going to have that conversation. And that will probably ruffle some feathers, but that's okay. We're going to bring truth to the table. We're going to lay out the facts on all that different stuff. And if there's another subject you would like to hear me talk about, by all means, leave me a message. Till next time, be cool to each other, all right?